She always said goodbye like it was the last time. But this time I didn't say it back. I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for those 12 minutes. It wasn't the traffic. It wasn't the weather. It wasn't even fate. It was just life. I missed her final breath by exactly 12 minutes, and somehow that tiny space between almost and too late has become the loudest part of my grief. But this story isn't only about what I missed. It's about everything she gave me before that, and how even in those final moments, she kept her promise to me, in a way I never expected. The last time we spoke, she asked me to bring her a cassette player. She said the silence was getting too loud. She'd been in hospice for nearly 3 weeks when I got the call from the nurse. "She's still holding on," she said softly, "but you might want to come soon." I dropped everything, didn't even turn off the coffee machine. I just grabbed my coat, the old tape player she loved, and the cassette labeled Autumn Winds Side A in her handwriting. My mother never feared dying. What scared her was the idea of fading away with no one noticing. She'd lived quietly, humbly, a librarian for 32 years, but in her own way she wanted a meaningful ending, something more than machines and white walls. I wasn't ready to lose her. I'd said goodbye too many times in my head, but none of them felt real. And now, I was racing to get there in time. Not just to say goodbye, but to be there. I had promised her that. I had looked her in the eyes weeks before and told her I wouldn't let her go alone. She nodded, smiled, and said, "Then hurry. You know how impatient I get. But the world doesn't always wait for us." Traffic lights turn red, elevators stall, nurses miscalculate minutes, and grief doesn't check your schedule. She used to say I was her quiet child, but in truth I just didn't know how to tell her I loved her out loud. My mother and I were never loud people. We spoke in books, in notes on the fridge, in silent rides to the grocery store. I was the kind of kid who didn't say much, not because I didn't feel, but because I felt too much. She understood that. She never forced words out of me. She just made space. She'd leave little notes in my lunchbox growing up. "You're doing great. I saw your drawing on the fridge. I'm proud of you." She'd slip them, in between the sandwich and the apple slices like secrets only we shared. I still have a few of them, folded and creased, ink faded from time and fingers. As I got older, our communication shrank even more. Life got louder and we stayed the same. Quiet. I moved out, worked far, visited less than I should have. Every time I came home, she'd have my favorite mug clean and ready. She'd ask about my life and I'd answer vaguely. "It's good," I'd say, "I'm busy." She'd smile and nod. That was enough for her. But now I realize maybe it wasn't. She had a favorite spot by the window where the morning sun landed. Around 8:40 a.m. every day. She'd sit there with a cup of tea and her cassette player, the same one I was holding in the car on my way to her bedside. She loved the way music made silence feel less lonely. Her favorite tape was an old recording of Autumn Wind Through the Trees. "It reminds me that time moves even when we don't," she once said. The last visit before hospice, I remember sitting by that window. She looked thinner than usual, fragile, but still elegant. She never talked about death, not directly. But that day she said, "I hope when I go someone will be there. Just one person, not to fix anything, just to know that I was here." I promised her right then without her asking, "You won't be alone." She smiled, that tired, motherly smile. "Then hurry," she said again, half joking. "You know how I hate waiting." We both laughed, and neither of us thought that would be the last time I'd hear her voice in person. The silence in the room wasn't empty. It was full of everything I didn't get to say. When I reached the hospice, I knew something was off. The receptionist gave me a look, not pity, not alarm, just a knowing kind of stillness. Like she knew that everything I was about to feel would start the moment I opened that door down the hall. I signed in barely and walked toward room 208. I had memorized that number like it was the password to a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Her door was slightly ajar, just enough to let the hallway light creep inside. There was no sound, no beeping machines, no soft murmurs from nurses adjusting IVs. Just stillness. I pushed it open slowly, She was there, but not. Her body was in the bed, hands folded neatly, a thin white blanket pulled up just under her chin. Her eyes were closed. Peacefully. Too peacefully. The kind of peace you don't see in someone who's just sleeping. A small CD player, not hers, sat quietly on the nightstand. There was no music playing. No wind. Just that sterile, unbearable. Calm. A nurse entered behind me quietly. She passed about 12 minutes ago, she said softly. She went gently. Very gently. I didn't speak. I don't even remember blinking. My hand was still gripping the cassette player. I didn't even bring flowers. Just that stupid player with her favorite tape, like some offering from a child trying to make something right. I wanted to scream, or cry. Or rewind time like the reels on that cassette. Instead, I just sat down next to her, slowly, like I didn't want to disturb her rest, even though she was already gone. 12 minutes. That's all. I could have taken one less exit. Left 5 minutes earlier, skipped the coffee, walked faster in the parking lot, anything, but I didn't. And that's what grief does. It makes math out of pain. Seconds become regrets. Minutes become failure. I sat there for a while, not sure what to do. Not even sure if I was allowed to touch her. But eventually I placed the cassette player on the edge of the bed and pressed play. The sound of autumn wind filled the silence. That's when I cried. I cried like I hadn't in decades. Not because she was gone, but because I hadn't said goodbye. Not with words. Not with anything that mattered, and yet the room didn't feel completely empty. The wind in the recording rustled like leaves through memory. Like maybe she was still listening. Like maybe she had waited just long enough. It wasn't the first time she waited for me, but it was the first time I didn't make it. I sat. In that quiet room, my eyes fixed on her hands. The same hands that once stitched the tear in my backpack when I was 11, that taught me how to tie a tie before my first job interview, that held mine without hesitation when I crashed my bike and scraped both knees. She had always been there. Not in the loud, dramatic way some parents are, but in the small, consistent ways that matter more than we realize. She waited outside in the cold when I was late from soccer practice, waited up in the kitchen when I missed curfew, waited in the hospital lobby when I had my appendix removed and didn't want anyone to see me afraid. She never complained. She just waited, quietly, patiently, like she always knew I'd come around. One memory came crashing in harder than the rest. Was 17. I had just found out I didn't get into the college I thought would define my future. I was embarrassed, angry, and not ready to talk. So I stormed out of the house, ignored her voice calling after me, and disappeared for a few hours. When I came back late that night, she was sitting in the same chair by the window, a lamp still on, a cup of tea cold beside her. No scolding, no lectures, just her eyes meeting mine and a quiet, "I saved you a slice of pie." That moment had always stayed with me. Not because of the pie or the forgiveness, but because she waited. Again, like she always would. So sitting next to her now, with autumn wind playing softly from that cassette player, I started to wonder, had she waited for me this time too? Maybe those last 12 minutes stretched longer for her. Maybe she held on, eyes closed but heart open, listening, hoping to hear the click of the door, the sound of my steps. Or maybe she knew I was coming and chose to go peacefully before I arrived. That would be just like her, never wanting to burden me with the weight of watching her leave. I leaned back in the chair, exhausted. Not from the day, but from a lifetime of almosts. Almost calling her more, almost asking more questions about her past, almost telling her out loud just how much I loved her. And yet, as the tape reached the part where the wind died down and a soft rustling of leaves began, I swear I could hear her voice in my head, and calm, gentle, amused. "You're here now," it said, "and that's enough." I thought I had lost my chance to say goodbye, but she had already said hers in her own way. It was the nurse who handed me the envelope. She entered the room gently, her face soft with understanding, and said, "Your mother asked us to give you this only after." She placed it in my hands with quiet reverence, a cream-colored envelope, slightly yellowed, with my name in her familiar cursive, Thomas. No to, no from, just my name. Like she knew I'd be there. Like she knew I'd need it. I didn't open it right away. I held it for a while, letting the weight of it settle in. The envelope wasn't heavy, but it might as well have been made of stone. In that moment, it felt like it contained everything I didn't get to say, and everything she did. Eventually, I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded once. The handwriting was hers, though shakier than I remembered. The ink slightly smudged in places, like she had paused, maybe cried, or maybe her hands had just gotten weaker. "My sweet boy," it began, "if you're reading this, then I've already left. I'm sorry I couldn't wait just a little longer. I tried, I promise, I really did. But the body has its own timing, and mine was gently letting go. I know you're hurting. And I know you probably feel like you missed something important. But listen to me closely. You didn't. You were with me every step of the way, even when you were far. Every phone call, every quiet visit, every cup of tea, I felt your love. You didn't have to say it, I knew. And I want you to stop carrying that weight. I know you. You'll turn those 12 minutes into a lifetime of guilt if I let you, so I won't. I'm not letting you. Live, laugh loudly like your father. Love fully even when it scares you. And when you sit by a window someday, let the light hit your face and think of me, but only with peace, only with joy. You were my greatest pride, and you were never late. I love you always, Mom." By the end of it, I was shaking. The tears came slow at first, then all at once. I held that letter like it was her hand, warm, present, real. All the things I thought I'd lost forever were right there in ink and paper. She hadn't just written a goodbye. She had given me permission to forgive myself. She had given me something no one else could have, peace, and just like that, her voice was back in the room. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as truth. She'd never left me behind, she'd only gone ahead. I thought the hardest part would be losing her. I was wrong. The hardest part was learning how to live without her, and still let her love guide me. The days after her passing were a blur, a strange cocktail of numbness and unexpected clarity. The world kept moving, as it always does. The sun rose, traffic lights changed, people laughed at cafes as if nothing had happened, and in some way nothing had, at least to them. But for me, the axis of my world had shifted. I kept the letter close, folded in my wallet at first, then framed quietly on the desk where she used to help me with homework. I read it often, not because I forgot what it said, but because I needed to feel her words settle into the cracks of my grief. Her message became something more than comfort. It became instruction. I started showing up differently. I called people I hadn't spoken to in years. I sent letters, real letters, like she would, to friends I had lost touch with. I told people what I felt when I felt it. No more holding back. No more waiting. I visited her favorite bookstore once a week. It had this little table in the back where she used to sit with a stack of poetry and a mug of tea. I brought my own book, sat in the same chair, and imagined her across from me, not as a ghost, but as a quiet presence, reminding me to slow down. There was one morning, not long after the funeral, when I walked into that store and found a cassette tape tucked into a copy of Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. It wasn't hers, it wasn't labeled, but I bought it anyway. When I played it that night, it was just wind, soft, sweeping wind. It wasn't the same tape she loved, but it might as well have been. I sat with it for nearly an hour, the sound washing over the room like her voice in a different form. Something shifted that night. I stopped feeling late. I stopped chasing the guilt of those 12 minutes, because I realized something she had always known. It's not about being there at the exact moment someone leaves. It's about all the moments before. It's about how well you loved when you still had the chance. And maybe about how you carry them with you long after they're gone. Some places remember. They hold a version of us waiting quietly for us to return. A few weeks later, I found myself driving to the old house, the one where I grew up, where she raised me, where nothing ever felt loud unless it was laughter. It had already been emptied, cleaned, and listed for sale, but I still had the keys, just for a little while longer. I didn't go there for anything practical. I didn't need to pack or check the mailbox. I just needed to feel her. It was Quiet when I entered. Not the eerie, echoing kind of quiet, more like a warm silence that had been waiting. The kind of hush that wraps around you like a childhood blanket. Soft, familiar, safe. I walked through each room slowly, trailing my hand along the walls like I was tracing a memory. The hallway where she used to leave sticky notes. The kitchen, where she danced once barefoot and laughing, holding a spatula like a microphone. The couch where we sat through 100 rainy evenings, just existing near each other, never needing to fill the silence. And then I found it. The window seat in the living room. Her favorite, cushions slightly sunken in the middle like her shape was still resting there. That's where she waited for me all those nights I was late. That's where she read books with yellowed corners and underlined passages. That's where she taught me to sit still and pay attention, not just to the world but to myself. The light was pouring in exactly like it used to, golden, soft, warm. I sat down. No music, no cassette tape, just me and the quiet. For a moment, I closed my eyes, and I swear I could almost hear her footsteps in the hallway. Not haunting, just familiar, present, like part of the house itself. I stayed there a long time, not because I was waiting for her, but because I finally understood why she always waited for me. Love, in her language, was presence. It was making space for someone to come home to. And this place, this seat, this light, it wasn't just a memory. It was a monument to that kind of love. Before I left, I placed the cassette player on the cushion and pressed play one more time. The sound of autumn wind filled the room again, and it didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like she was saying, I told you I'd always be here. She didn't leave me with answers. She left me with something better, the courage to keep living with love. Grief, I've learned, doesn't disappear. It doesn't evaporate with time like mist burned away by morning sun. It becomes something else, a companion. A weight that teaches you how to walk differently, slower, softer, more aware of every step. In the months that followed her passing, I stopped trying to move on. That phrase always felt wrong, like I was supposed to pack up my sorrow and find a new destination. But what I realized, thanks to her, is that we don't move on from people. We move forward with them, carrying their imprint inside us. I started volunteering once a week at the hospice where she spent her final days. Not because I'm noble or brave, but because something inside me changed. I wanted to be there for people who were afraid to say goodbye. I wanted to sit beside them the way I wish I had sat beside her. Sometimes I read, sometimes I just sit. One man asked me to bring music, so I brought the cassette player. He didn't say much, but when the sound of wind filled the room, he smiled. Not at me, but at something beyond me. Something that maybe he was remembering, or someone. That moment reminded me of my mother, of how she found comfort in silence, in sound, in small things, of how she left not with fanfare but with grace. And in that grace, she gave me a gift I didn't know I needed, a new way to see the world. I started noticing the way light falls through trees in late afternoon. I found myself saying I love you out loud, to my partner, to my brother, to myself. I stopped waiting for the perfect time to show up. I just started showing up, and every time doubt crept in, every time I asked myself if I had done enough, if I had truly kept my promise, I went back to her letter. You were never late. That sentence changed me, because maybe being there isn't about timing. Maybe it's about presence, not in a moment but across a lifetime. And if that's true, then I had been there all along. In every quiet gesture, in every unspoken kindness, in every cup of tea we shared without words. Her goodbye wasn't loud, but it was complete. You don't need to be there for the last breath to say goodbye. Sometimes the love you leave behind says it for you. I used to think that being there at the very end was the most important thing, that the final moment was sacred, defining, necessary, but now I know better. It's not the moment someone leaves that shapes your connection with them. It's everything that came before. The laughter, the arguments, the quiet breakfasts, the forgotten birthdays and the remembered ones, the gentle ways you chose each other over and over again. I missed her by 12 minutes, but she never missed a moment with me. And in the stillness of her absence, I found her presence more fully than ever before. In wind through leaves, in the smell of old books, in the feeling of sunlight on my face through the window she loved so much. She lives now in how I treat people, in how I say what I feel, in how I show up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Sometimes I go back to that hospice or the bookstore or the empty house soon to be filled by strangers, and I sit, I listen, I remember, and I speak to her not with my voice but with my life, because even though I missed the final breath, I didn't miss the goodbye. It had already happened, 1,000 times before, in every hug, in every shared silence, in every "I'm proud of you" tucked into a lunchbox or whispered over tea. 12 minutes can feel like forever, but love, real love, doesn't care about time. And in that kind of love, I was never too late. If this story touched you in any way, stay with us. Here we tell the stories most people are too afraid to share. Stories of love, loss, and the quiet goodbyes that shape who we are. Subscribe if you feel something, and if you've ever missed a moment, you're not alone.